Hello everyone, welcome to the Scumdog's Kennel. I'm your host, Chris Williams, and in today's Cryptid Corner mini-episode, I have more Bigfoot stories to tell you all about today, folks. This time from the state of Washington. Let's read these stories of the military encountering various Sasquatch and Bigfoot entities, folks. The title of the article is Fort Lewis, Washington, Bigfoot Encounters, Why Soldiers Keep Reporting Sasquatch Near the Nisqually Training Grounds. Either way, let's get into this article now. Fort Lewis, now part of Joint Base Lewis-Machode, sits on an immense tract of training land in western Washington with dense woods, wetlands, prairies, and the Nisqually River cutting through terrain ideal for concealment. Official JBLM history confirms the installation's scale and notes that the Rainier Train Area was expanded south of Nisqually River during World War II, which matters because several of the most compelling military Sasquatch reports cluster in and around those same restricted areas. What makes these reports worth attention is not simply that soldiers claimed something strange, it is that trained personnel, often operating at night under field conditions in areas closed to the public, repeatedly described the same broad pattern: immense size, heavy movement, unusual gait, and an immediate decision to stay as little as possible afterwards. Let's get into these stories and hear exactly what these soldiers kept encountering basically through the decades, folks. So let's get into the first story and read exactly what happened. A reader named Mac forwarded a first-hand account involving a soldier stationed near Fort Lewis in 1989. According to the account, the soldier and his platoon were conducting a reconnaissance exercise along the Nisqually River a few miles from the fort. He was ordered to swim across, climb the muddy embankment, and scout the opposite side. Moments after disappearing into the trees, the platoon heard him scream. He came crashing back down the bank in a panic, crossed the river in a state of hysteria, and told the others he had unexpectedly run into a Bigfoot just as striking. The men then heard something large and powerful moving fast through the forest on the far side, as though the creature itself had bolted after the surprise encounter. Mac later learned that the experience changed the soldier's life and that he eventually moved to Oregon and became involved in Bigfoot research. That account does not stand alone. Other military-related reports tied to Fort Lewis and its surrounding terrain corridors suggest a recurring pattern. Indeed, folks, because this is just one of several such accounts that took place in the area, folks. But why? Was Bigfoot living on the land even before the fort was built? Perhaps. But let's read on to the next story. One of the better-known online cases is Buffalo Report-11930, a 1971 sighting by a young soldier in basic training at Fort Lewis. He was on overnight perimeter duty near the barracks during a cold, moonlit winter night when he noticed a large black figure at the tree line beyond an open snowy field. He watched it move toward him with what he described as a strange, swaying gait. The size, the breadth across the shoulders, and the way it blended into the background unnerved him enough that he retreated inside and told no one. A later follow-up stated that he had not yet even been issued a weapon and feared being ordered to investigate the figure if he'd reported it. I can imagine why, folks, he didn't, because a lot of people who did basically suggest that they saw Bigfoot, they were often laughed at, folks. This is seen in both UFO circles and paranormal cryptid encounters as well, folks, so I'm not surprised he didn't report it. But we're only partway through these stories, folks, so let's continue now. Another Fort Lewis case, Buffalo Report-3281, reaches back to April 1979 in the Rainier Train Area. An Army infantry lieutenant and his platoon sergeant were moving through dense woods during an escape and evasion exercise north of Flander Lake, aiming for the Nisqually Bridge. After the sergeant moved ahead to scout, the lieutenant heard heavy footsteps and then saw a large, dark, hulking figure loom up in a clearing about 50 feet away before it ran off through the timber. The platoon sergeant had also heard and seen something large moving through the brush. Both men were outdoorsmen. Both concluded it was not a deer, not a bear, and not another soldier. Both chose to keep quiet and continue the mission. So at the very least, they weren't going to basically be rattled by the sight of a Bigfoot, folks. So I'll give these two soldiers credit that they did not stop and did not basically turn back from their mission. So they continued with what they were doing, even though they knew what they had seen in the back of their minds probably really was the legendary Bigfoot, folks. So, yeah, this was years before basically Harry and the Hendersons, folks, and a few years after the infamous episode of The $1 Million Man, where basically the Bionic Man fights Bigfoot, folks. So, at the very least, they might have known about what the entity, or basically possibly was, but probably they were beside themselves that the fact that it was real, at least to them folks. Either way, let's continue. A related military train report dates to August 1982 near Greenwater, east of Fort Lewis. In Beffero Report -4452, a soldier assigned to mountain train at Huckleberry Creek said his squad found several large, barefoot, human-like tracks pressed into soft ground near a stream. They measured roughly 14 inches long, about 7.5 inches wide, and showed a stride of roughly 4 to 4.5 feet. What pushes this report into the more interesting category is what happened later. When the witness mentioned the prints during an after-action debrief, the squad instructor strongly advised them to forget what they had seen and not mention it again, because maybe at that point, folks, there were standing orders from the top brass not to acknowledge these beings. That any reports of Bigfoot would not be accepted, and perhaps there would be discipline for those that did. I imagine this could be in the back of the squad instructor's mind, folks. Either way, let's read further now. Years later, another Fort Lewis witness, recorded in Beffero Report 28197, described a nighttime training exercise from his time as an NCO Academy instructor. He reported first smelling a foul odor, then hearing heavy movement in the brush, then seeing a pair of teardrop-shaped orange glowing eyes moving left to right through the woods at roughly his own eye level. Despite the terrain, his impression was of a creature 8 to 10 feet tall with a 4 to 5 foot stride. In the follow-up, instructor Scott Tyler noted that Joint Base Lewis McChode has a history of Sasquatch reports and said that many soldiers who reported such sightings to military authorities were told to keep silent. That assertion should be treated cautiously because it reflects the investigators' interpretation rather than an official military position, but it is consistent with the culture of suppression or self-censorship evident in multiple witness narratives. I would have to say, yeah, I do have to say that in a lot of these reports, folks, you see basically them keeping quiet about it and basically not trying to basically confess that they saw Bigfoot, folks, for the fear that their career would be hurt. But we can discuss all of this more after we read the final story. The Alaska account, forward with max material, expands the pattern beyond Washington. In Beffero Report -6486, a Special Forces A-team operating in remote Alaska in March 1988 found a line of bipedal tracks in deep snow that by their estimate implied a roughly 9-foot-tall, 500 to 600-pound track maker moving with an extraordinary efficiency through terrain that challenged even experienced soldiers on snowshoes. 11 men with substantial field and tracking experiences examined the trail. They followed it for about an hour before hearing what the team commander described as the most horrific sound any of them had ever heard. The woods went silent. His senior NCO then told him, in effect, that the team did not want to discover what was at the end of those tracks. They broke off pursuit. The commander later concluded that whoever made the trail had deliberately used terrain as a trained operator would during escape and evasion. That detail is especially notable because it echoes the Fort Lewis 1979 report, in which the witness was also in an escape and evasion context. So, yeah, folks, these entities know the terrain they're in, and these people who have basically been trained to basically recognize these kinds of tricks and, abilities that, people who try to basically evade, capture, use, folks, realize that these entities know exactly what they're doing, that they're at least intelligent enough to basically recognize that these men, the soldiers in the area, are threats to them, and they do all they can to evade them, using misdirection to get the soldiers to go in one direction while the Bigfoot will go the other, perhaps along with others of its kind. Perhaps they work in groups as well, folks. Maybe in Fort Lewis, Washington, there are groups of Bigfoot that know that they live on land that basically is used by humans. They're very dangerous because these are trained soldiers, and even they can't deal with these entities at all. So, what can I actually say about this, folks? All I can say is that this is, the more relevant stories I've ever read about, folks. These are trained soldiers who know what they're doing, and the brass themselves knows something is up on the land. So, indeed, folks, a very informative collection of stories. Anyway, we're at the end, so please go subscribe to my YouTube channel, Read Comics That Are Bad For You. You can use the YouTube link down below in descriptions or the chat to go subscribe to me. Hit that like button for me. Make sure you're still subscribed. Leave some comments down below. Hit that bell for notifications. Make sure to hit the part of the bell that'll give you all future notifications. And please share this video out. I'm Chris Williams from the Scumdogs Kennel. Thank you all for joining me. I'll be back again tomorrow with another great video. So be sure to come back again then. Until next time, folks, I'll see you all again soon.